Hey everyone, welcome to Scouting Session, episode number 10. I'm Jérôme Bérubé, and I'm joined by, once again, Brad Allen. Hey Brad, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going very good. I'm conflicted because it's exciting to get to talk about anything draft related, but then we're doing a segment where we look really bad. So situations where I don't really know how to feel right now.
Yeah, so as Brad said, this week we're going to talk about players we miss in the 2019 NHL Draft. We did the 2018 draft version a few weeks ago. I think people like to see us fail, so let's talk about some players that we miss. And Brad, let's start with our first player that we're going to talk about, and it's a guy we really like in his draft year. Was Kaapo Kakko, who went second overall to the New York Rangers. Still plays for the New York Rangers, but it's not been a very pleasant situation for us watching him in New York. We had him really close from Jack Hughes, and even at some point in the year we were thinking about putting Kakko ahead of Hughes. So maybe Brad, you can start what you thought of Kakko back in 2019. What has happened since with him.
Well, hindsight bias is a heck of a drug. Let's start there, okay? Before everybody loses their mind about what Jérôme just said. At that time, Kakko was considered like a bona fide elite prospect, and we were a little bit worried about Hughes' transition to pro hockey with his frame. And admittedly, a little justified considering he's had some injury history. So we thought it was a bit tighter. Obviously, that's not the case now. So the big thing with Kaapo Kakko is he is the poster child for what happens when you overvalue an accelerated curve. So he was a player who's playing up in the league of the entire season for TPS. He did very well in TPS. He was almost a point per game, as you can see there. Yeah. And what really happened was he solidified his draft at the World Championships by outperforming Hughes. He was better than Hughes at the World Championships. In fact, you could make an argument he was better than Hughes at the U20s. Well, was Hughes even at the U20s? I can't remember if he was at the U20s.
So every tournament that year, he was better than Jack Hughes.
Essentially, yeah. Obviously, he couldn't perform at the U18s where Hughes was incredible. But the U20s and World Championships, Kaapo Kakko looked incredible. So it was one of those situations where it's like, guaranteed at the time top six power winger with so much potential, and he already had a 200-foot game. He was already advanced. There was almost like nothing missing. He's very much like a well-rounded, very intelligent player, and it's like, what could go wrong? Well, it turned out everything can go wrong with a prospect. Who would have thought? So one of the massive issues with Kaapo Kakko is his conditioning. I don't remember, Jérôme, if you knew this. I don't think I did, which was that it was that he had conditioning issues. Does he have asthma? He had some sort of issue. I can't remember what it was, but there's some sort of conditioning issue. And then the other factor is that his skating really has not improved. So like that was kind of like the blemish. It was okay. His skating's okay, and it will hold. And at the time we're like, well, his frame is good, his hands are good, so he'll be able to protect pucks on his back. He'll be able to create time and space for himself because he's smart. So he'll make advanced feints and have first phase deception, so he can slow down the opposing team, so he doesn't have to be that fast in the first place. That was kind of the idea of what he was gonna be. Is he'll just counteract his own speed limitations by slowing down everybody else around him. And it's really just not come together. He's never gotten quicker, and then he's not been able to counteract opposing players like we anticipated because he does not know how to use his frame like I envisioned he would be able to at this stage in his development. It's one of those situations where when I looked at him, I thought he'd be able to react dynamically to resistance. He'd be able to counterweight transfers. He'd be able to slip through checks or be able to take contact points and then be able to accelerate off of those and then spin off pressure and make plays. And none of it's really transpired at all into what I thought he'd be. I thought he'd be this down low machine that's very similar to Mikko Rantanen. And wow, is he nothing like Mikko Rantanen. So the big lesson for me is you have to be super careful about envisioning the ceiling of a player who's already very developed.
Yeah. So in the NHL, I think the best season he had is when he played on that kid line with Lafreniere and Philippe Hétiol. But like you look at the rest of his numbers or the other season that he had in New York, this season 1 goal in 13 games. Last year only 19 points in 60 games, and he's been injured a few times also. That has really hurt his development. But this is not a pick that is looking good for us or even the New York Rangers. Very unfortunate, because that was a player we really value. And one thing we value was playoff hockey. And we thought, when comparing him to Jack Hughes, where obviously the frame that Jack had was a bit concerning as far as like playoff hockey, seeing Kakko, how great he was in big moments in his draft year, we thought, they're not that far off. That sounds so silly saying this today, that they were not far off. But yeah, so we definitely missed on Kakko. There was a lot to like, and I don't know. He went to the Rangers. Probably was not ready for NHL hockey that year. The speed was, pretty obvious that he was a step behind. And also New York, the way their roster was shaped up, like they didn't have room for him on their top 6, so they had to play him as a third line forward. Same thing happened with Lafreniere. They didn't have room for him on the top 6, and it took a while, but Lafreniere has become a really good player for them. But Kakko has not. Seems like Kakko is like regressing since that good season he had in 2022, 2023 last season, and this year it's been very, very underwhelming. Oh yeah, we felt we missed that one. Not the first time, not the last time. And the next player that we're going to mention that we also failed was the 5th overall pick in that draft. Alex Turcotte was playing for the program that year, a really good team. Probably one of the best team ever with the program. It's something maybe we can talk about, that sometimes it's really hard to scout a stack team like the program when they have like, how many first rounders they had that year? They had a lot of them. I think 7 or 8 maybe from that team were in the first round. Turcotte went 5th in the draft. We had him ranked 4th. Maybe same question, Brad. Like, what did you see back then? What has happened since with Alex Turcotte? He's playing in the NHL this year, but he's more of a depth forward for the Kings. He still has some good energy, but looks like we completely misevaluate his skill level, because he has like struggled really to get anything going offensively. Even the year after his draft year in college, that was not a spectacular season for him at Wisconsin. Personally, I was surprised when he left Wisconsin after just 1 year. But anyway, Brad, I'll let you talk about Turcotte here.
Well, I'll start where you just left off. I think he tried to accelerate getting to the NHL too quickly, and that definitely hurt his development. He's one of those situations where there really is no true diamond etched floor, and sometimes the diamonds can actually be glass, and you just misinterpret it. You think they're diamonds, it's glass, and that floor is very breakable. And so that's Turcotte to a T. Turcotte was one of those players where well-rounded, no elite skill. Even though he wasn't that technically refined in one area, he would make up for it because he could Swiss Army knife his way through any positional lineup and help in any way that was needed. And unfortunately, it just never really came together. I remember watching him at the Zasnam tournament, which is a tournament in Germany where the U.S. team that's going to be at the U20s goes up against Germany in friendlies. And I watched him, and I thought he was actually pretty good in that event. And like the one thing that stood out to me was the effort level. I was like, okay, well, the effort level and the skating, like I understand why we thought the floor was as high as it was. But to your point, I really think that and this applies to Kakko as well, the skills level when you take the totality of it, is nowhere near where we thought it would be. We really, I think at that time in 2018, 2019, it was one of those situations where the league operates differently now than it did then. Like, you really are looking at 4 to 5 year windows when it comes to trying to evaluate exactly how skills applied on the ice and what way players are successful. And they had a bit of that more old school skill where it nowhere near as dynamic in terms of like how they apply sub-triangle leaks, or how they cut through hands when they're going from outside back to the inside, or how they manipulate players with their off looks and their deception, and how they set up static fakes and postural fakes. And there's a whole lot of technical mechanics now that really both Kakko and Turcotte never incorporated successfully. And I think that that's one of the reasons for Kakko's stagnation. And I think it's another reason that Turcotte's taken as long as it has for him to get to this point in his development. So yeah, it's one of those situations, I think, a couple of years ago, like, skills coaches I've talked to skills coaches, some of the best in the world. I've talked to Erik Karlsson, skill coach who's responsible for bringing him in the NHL. He's going to retire. He was going to quit. He was never even going to play in again before he was going to make the NHL, and before he sat down with the skills coach I talked to. I've talked to other skills coaches who are elite, like Brent Clarks and Claude Giroux, etc. One thing that's fascinating is both of them told me that there are teams that mandated them away from their players. They didn't want them near them. They're like, you're gonna try to teach them too much creativity. We want them playing north-south. Stop with the east-west nonsense. Stop with all this it's gonna break down our systems if you try to incorporate all this skill into their offense, essentially. And I'm not going to name the teams that said this to them, but like, it's one of those situations where I think that because teams were looking for like a very specific skill set of like north-south, more like vanilla base, they thought it would be more translatable. And now there's a reason on basically every player on the planet now has independent skills coaches. And you see it right now, Jérôme, CHL on. Every player we see, everybody knows how to incorporate fakes and feints and incorporate deception, and can use lateral cutbacks and weight transfers and pivots and mohawks, and then have handling plays where they're going through triangles while simultaneously stick lifting the defenseman, then turning them around and using his triangle against him to set up like feather passing plays, et cetera, et cetera. So it's one of those things where we definitely got the skill set in terms of his offensive potential wrong. And we also got the floor completely incorrect as well. And he is another enormously important lesson on the fact that there really is no diamond edge floors, even when we think there is. Like, there are very, very, very few every draft. Like, Celebrini's one, and like, that's, it's only the elite of the elite that you can truly say have those incredibly elite floors, like we thought Turcotte has.
Yeah, I mean, he was a safe, as we used to call him, like, he was a safe pick. Like, well, he's going to be a good second line center, two-way, really safe pick. You can't miss with that player. And yeah, we all miss on this player. There's not such a thing as being a safe prospect anymore. And what you look at him and Kakko as our first two, and even the third guy we're going to mention, not really like dynamic skill player. As I just said, Turcotte was going to be like this safe two-way center, second line center. Kakko was going to be a beast down low, but not really a dynamic player because the skating was just average at best. We had hoped the skating was going to improve, but it didn't. If we mention the next player, Vasili Podkolzin, again, another guy we like a lot. We had in rank 7th overall. So Kakko, Turcotte, and Podkolzin, that's 3 players in our top 7 that have really not make us look good. So Podkolzin, again, he was like another safe prospect that you're like, oh, you need guys like that on your team. He's a hard worker. He plays a really physical game. I mean, if people saw his fight a few weeks ago against Jeremy Lauzon, they will know what we're talking about, like a very North American Russian. But he has not been really good at the NHL level. Actually, his rookie year was okay, but then he has every year since he has his production has decreased. Even went back to the American Hockey League for a season or two with the Canucks. So, Brad, I know you follow the Canucks very closely, so maybe you can talk more here about Podkolzin. But that was a guy we really liked in his draft year, and then obviously we missed on him.
Yeah, I'll give him credit for this. It's like he could have already darted back to Russia, and he hasn't. So I give him full marks for that. I remember telling you this last year, Jérôme, when I was watching the AHL. Like, he was actually surging, and then he had that horrific head injury, had a seizure on the ice, and then that took him obviously a really long time to recover from. He was lights out before that injury. So it's one of those situations where I felt like he was just getting to where he needed to be to get up again, get some NHL reps and see where he was at. And then that happened. So this is one of those situations where I'm trying to give him a little bit more extended time than I would for some of these other prospects. But to your point, so this falls into a different category where we as a staff have had to reflect and try to reassess exactly how we evaluate certain aspects of the game. And one of those is like, we really look for competitive hockey players because we're fortunate enough to actually talk to real people in the industry. We get to talk to former players. So it's one of those situations where we know for them how significant finding players who are competitive are. Like, it is a super important aspect for having like star level players be competitive, because it creates a trickle down effect through your roster. Right? You want, like, the Sidney Crosbys of the world are natural leaders because of their on ice play and their off ice ability to want to get back on the ice when they're not playing. And that's where some of these players, at times can fall short and can really burn you, like the Dominic Box we talked about. But that's why we were so prominently trying to push Turcotte and Podkolzin. And we'll get to the next, Peyton Krebs, because these players are super competitive kids where we thought if they could hit, they could really start developing at an accelerated rate, ironically, considering none of them have. But because the competitiveness we saw on the ice would come off the ice, match off the ice, and they would be able to be in the gym, get bigger and stronger. They'd be coachable. They would learn faster. That was kind of our mindset towards these types of players. But the truth is, like, you can be as competitive as you want. You can be a Tasmanian devil. It doesn't matter if you don't have a certain skill threshold. If you do not match a top 6 skill threshold, it does not matter how competitive you are. And that's where we've had to, because of the 2018 and 2019 classes, where we got it wrong in the top 10, that's where we had to really reflect and be like, okay, hang on, let's make sure that, okay, we love this player, and yes, he's super competitive, but does he really fit something that can be at least top 9, or if we're talking top 10, 50 prospect, top 6? So that I think this type of player, Jérôme, is one of the reasons we've kind of like reassessed and tried to figure out exactly how we do this and take skill into consideration at as prominently as we can.
Yeah, skills and skating. So Podkolzin, Turcotte, Kakko, that was the skill skating combo. Probably, in 2024, 2025. Like, if we have a player like those three, we probably don't rank them. We rank them in 2019. Obviously, the best thing about scouting is learning from your mistake, and we have learned. We have a lot of the opportunity to learn from our mistakes, and that's at least one lesson I think we've learned. So we might like the pro package, the a prospect being really safe, can't miss, he's gonna play, but there's need to be like a certain skill level that can get hit. Same thing goes with the skating. So it's funny that we picked those players, because they're kind of like, in at least Turcotte and Podkolzin, they're kind of like similar, that were typical, that guy's going to play in the NHL, you don't have to worry about it, and then they don't really they don't really play. And they're a 4th line player right now, so it's kind of like a bad look on us and the teams that draft them. But scouting is hard, so it's a lesson learned, and you try to get better at it the next few years, and I think we did. The next player, as Brad mentioned, from now the Buffalo Sabres, but he was drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights, Peyton Krebs, 17 overall. We had him ranked 6, and he went 17. Obviously, there was an injury during the month of June that I think really affect where he went, because I'm pretty sure he would have been at least a top 10 pick, if not from that injury. And that, I think, has affected his skating. But again, like, that's Kakko, Turcotte, Krebs, Podkolzin. That's 4 players in our top 7 that have not really make us look good. Why are we doing this show? I don't know. we're not looking too good here. But yeah, Krebs, we just love again, similar to Turcotte, honestly. We really like the playmaking from him. We really like the two-way game. He was not a big, a good size center, but Turcotte also was not a big guy either. Looking back, maybe that's something that might, stop us from ranking them a bit too high. Like those 5'11", 6 feet center, they have to be really, really good to be, top 6 guy. Maybe that's a lesson that we have learned over the last few years. And yeah, Krebs has just not been able to deliver offensively with the Sabres. If you look at his number here, I'm going to share the page here, but 22 points in 48 games, 26 and 74, 17 and 80 this year, 5 and 15. So, he's a depth center. I think his role has even decreased this year with the Sabres, with McLeod coming in. Again, not a good ranking by us. With him 6. I do wonder, like, if he didn't get hurt in the month of June in his draft year, like, if that would have changed anything, because I think has really hurt his skating going forward. Like, so it's a tough situation, honestly. Like, it's like question we have that we're not gonna have answer for it, because we'll never know, I guess. But that was another safe prospect for us that we thought he was going to be a really good second line center. Very smart. I don't know if I would say tough to play against, but he was a very he was a high compete guy, not a hugely physical guy, but he was we love to compete on that player. Even in junior, that's another lesson we learned. If you look in his draft year, scored 19 goals. Usually that means that's not going to be a big time NHL goal scorer. Like, I can't remember seeing a guy who doesn't score 20 goals in his draft year. That doesn't mean that guy is not going to score 30 at the NHL level. So that's another thing to keep in mind sometime. Kirby Dach, that same draft year was the same thing. He didn't score a lot of goals in his draft year, and you look at him in the NHL, not much of a goal scorer. So it's something you have to keep in mind. It's stats are stats, but it's doesn't happen often. You see a guy not scoring a lot of goals in junior. That doesn't usually translate to be a big time goal scorer. So, Brad, I'll let you go on Krebs. Not the best not the best ranking by us once again.
Well, I think one of the things that was unfortunate for us was we were a bit lower on Kirby Dach relative to the consensus.
Yeah.
And Krebs dominated him in head-to-heads, like dominated him offensively, dominated him physically. I remember, I'll never forget one sequence where Krebs totally outbattled him, gained inside positioning, and knocked Dach on his butt on the ice and just took the puck right off of him. And on the way off he went. And it was like, okay, like, I don't care what anyone says. Like, I think Krebs is just going to be a better player than Dach, even though, like, you look at the physical growth rate at Dach, and there was a lot more room there because he's 6'4" and Krebs was smaller. And it turned out they're both bad. So it's like, oh yeah, well, Krebs, look how much better he is than Dach. Well, they're both really bad. So that was kind of unfortunate for us. One thing that's huge about this player in terms of like evaluation, what do you learn from it? He was never a gifted scorer. We knew that. We thought the playmaking was better than it is at the NHL level. Like, he can make dynamic passing plays. We've seen them, but at the NHL, that doesn't seem to be translating for where it was in junior at all. I thought we'd be seeing some highlight reel passing plays around the clock. We are not seeing that. That's rare. Admittedly, even for us, we all sorts of things wrong, as you guys know, but that's one we usually get right. We're usually very aware when a playmaker's skill set is and how it's going to translate. It's one of the reasons that we liked Bérubé more than Wahlstrom. We thought Bérubé was a much better, more dynamic playmaker, and that's translated the way we expected and how he works. And but it did not happen with this player. And so a bit of an anomaly for us from that perspective. But then, also to Jerome's point, the injury, and then the skating base is not developed. And I mean, he can't score, he can't skate, he's small, and so he makes occasionally still pretty impressive passing plays, but nowhere near at the rates I thought. And you're left with, listen, to give him how bad this went for me. I remember at the draft, I was on radio live on the NHL network calling out GMs, telling them how ridiculous it was that he fell to Vegas, telling everybody, oh, you just want Vegas to win or be in like cup contention the whole time. And this is insane. How could he fall like this? Well, there it is. That one's on me. That's definitely one on me. So, yeah, Krebs is Freddy Krueger. Halloween was just celebrated. He's the Freddy Krueger effect. He lives and haunts our nightmares.
Yeah, so you mentioned Kirby Dach. So I remember the conversation we had, and Kirby Dach went third, and I remember I was a bit surprised when that happened because we had him 8. So Krebs was 6, Dach was 8, and one conversation we had, I mean more than one, but that what you just mentioned, the head-to-head games between those two players, Krebs was much better than Dach. Dach was more raw, he was bigger, but we really thought Krebs had the heart, the grit to become like that second line center, and we were really not sold on Dach. If he was like a gamer, we didn't think he had that in him. But both guys are struggling in the NHL. Dach has struggled with injuries many times. And he's coming back from missing a full year, and it's not been pretty in Montreal this season for him. So what a draft! That draft is just like, we said 2018. Yeah, we said 2018 was a really bad draft, and like I'm looking at 2019, it's not looking that much better. So we'll move on to the next player. Ville Heinola from the Winnipeg Jets, plays in the American Hockey League. I'm not exactly sure where he's playing this year because he might be hurt because he has not played any games so far. So should have made my research for the podcast, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, Heinola was one of those defensemen that we used to really like. He was a smart defenseman, made a lot of good decisions on the ice, played fast, played like that quick mind, made quick decisions with the puck. Since those 2018, 2019 season, NHL has changed a lot. Like those defensemen are really struggling to play well in the NHL. And he was an average sized defenseman, but back then we thought he had a chance because he was a smart defenseman, he could move pucks. It's crazy how things have changed in 5 years. Guys like that are struggling now to play in the NHL because they're not high end offensively enough. They're small defensemen, so they can't really be counted as real shutdown defensemen. And he was not a good skater. He was an average skater for his size. And those guys they don't get picked that high anymore in the draft. They're more like mid-round picks at this point by NHL team. So it's really crazy how quickly hockey, the NHL has changed, scouting has changed. And that's why I feel like you want to be a good scout, study the NHL, study the trend in the NHL, study what works, study what doesn't work, and also it changed so quickly. You might think something is working, and then 4 years later that doesn't work anymore. It's a tough job. it's a tough job, guys. And you have to really, be on the ball and really know what's going on at the NHL level to be a good scout for the draft. So, Brad, I'll let you go with Heinola. What's your take on him, and what has happened for him since 2019?
Well, just to bolster your statement there, Jérôme, like every executive or director of scouting I talk to always emphasizes how they always get their staff to watch NHL games throughout the season while they're still scouting amateur hockey. Like, you just have to do it. It's just the game, as you mentioned, like for the school I'm building, the year I've started at is 2013. It doesn't look like the same sport. It's the defensemen, how defensemen operate in 2013, 2014. It doesn't even look like the same sport. The goalies don't look like the same. Forget the 80s and 90s. I know it's like completely different, but like even in the mid 2000s now, like goalies don't look anything like they used to. It's insane how fast this sport changes, and your adaptation as individuals and as a staff must be rapid fire. You must be able to hone your mistakes. You gotta be able to know when you made them. You gotta hone them, and that's what we're trying to do here. So with Heinola, I remember telling you, Jérôme, my comp for him was a less intense, slightly smarter Henri Jokiharju, and I thought that was a player. I like Henri Jokiharju. I thought that was a great pick at the time. Was it Chicago who made that pick,
Jérôme? Yeah.
And then he's Buffalo. So yeah, and I thought he'd play. I thought he'd be like a number 4 puck mover. That was kind of how I envisioned Jokiharju. I guess he's kind of that. I don't know. I don't watch Buffalo enough to know right now where he's at. But the big problem with Heinola is, like, you take away the intensity that that Jokiharju possesses most of the time, and well, that's not good enough. This is a player who just never really intense, more of a cerebral style player, very intelligent player. But if you're 6 feet tall and you lack intensity, that's going to cost you. It's going to basically keep you out of the league. I think that's what's happened with this player up to this point, because he's smart enough to play, and I think he's talented enough to play, and I think his numbers in the AHL reflect that, and they did in his draft year as well. It's just one of those situations where if you are not 6'4", 6'5", and toolsy with a tremendous amount of range as a defenseman, you better bring it, and he doesn't bring it nearly often enough at this stage in his development. I really think that's the main reason he's not playing right now.
Yeah, and so he went 20 in the draft. We had him ranked 16, so I think the Jets had him in the same ballpark as us. Right. But hockey has changed so fast that and he's been in the American Hockey League with the Jets for like forever, basically. If you look at here on the sheet here, like his first game there was 2020. It's almost like 4 years, almost 5 years now that he's been in the system, and played 35 games in 4 seasons. It's a tough deal. I don't know what's going to happen with him, because it doesn't look like the Jets were so good this year. Like, how is he going to play for the Jets this year? I don't know. I think maybe he gets traded at some point. Maybe he's one of those guys that will go back overseas. He has done what he needed to do in the American Hockey League. He just probably needs a chance at the NHL level, but I don't know if he's going to get that chance with the Jets. But he's a proof that another proof that hockey has changed so fast, and those average size defensemen that are not very dynamic, either offensively or offensively. It's really hard for those guys to play in the NHL, and he's another proof of that. And let's move on, Brad, to another player that we somewhat miss back in 2019. He's off to a really good start. It's Connor McMichael with the Washington Capitals. Used to play for the London Knights. He's off to a really good start with the Caps here. With 10 goals in 14 games this season. He was drafted 25th overall back in 2019. We had him rank, I believe, just outside the first round, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so he was 32nd, which was like back then there was 31 pick in first round. I believe. So Seattle was not there. So we had him just outside the first round. I remember we had some good debate about him during the year, and he was a bit of a frustrating player to scout in his draft year. But if you look at the result after his draft year, he's been a really good player. At the pro level, there's been some up and down. Even last year, not exactly a spectacular season last season, but he's doing well this year with the Caps. He's scoring a lot of goals. Looks like he's going to become like that 25, 30 goal guy at the NHL level at least. So very interesting player. I know, Brad, you watch him a lot in his draft year, so I'll let you take over here, but give us your 2 cents on McMichael.
Well, I can't speak for Mark Edwards, but I'm going to speak for Mark Edwards here and tell you, I guarantee you this one haunts me and he haunts Mark Edwards. So one thing I've never forgotten that Mark told me was he had a call with Mark Hunter, who obviously owns the London Knights, and he was telling Mark Edwards about how hard McMichael shoots the puck and how it's him, even if you're not watching in practice, because when he hits the post, it had like a very distinct sound. That was how heavy his shot was. His shot quality was that good. It was very similar to like Logan Mailloux. And I remember, I didn't know, and I still don't know Mark Hunter that well, but one thing I've learned from that is that was like a subtle hint to tell our staff that he thinks we had him too low. And we did. Turns out Mark Hunter was right. We definitely had him too low. This was a player who was a Swiss Army knife player. Actually, our style of player in a lot of ways, Jérôme, which is why it hurts us so much, because we love Swiss Army knife, well-rounded players who are incredibly intelligent, because intelligence scales. Like he was incredible spatial awareness. He could anticipate plays in advance. His processing rates were extremely fast. He could pass a puck. He had excellent vision. He knew when to shoot and when to pass, which a lot of prospects at that age didn't know. Incredible at sneaking through backdoor coverage and tracking pucks down low. That was like one of his true gifts, and it is actually one of the gifts that's translated to his production this season. Almost all of his goals are net front, in tight, right place, right space type of situation. So what we did wrong was we weighted the lack of effort level too heavily, and we thought of it as like an inherent quality as opposed to him just maturing. He needed more time to naturally mature as a player and figure out what he wanted to be. And we expected more of like a 200-foot game at that time. We expected a pacier player, and we expected a player with more attention to detail than he had at that time. We weighted that too heavily, and as a result of that, we dropped him too far off, and the rest is history. We've been trying to compensate with London ever since, and so far, admittedly, pretty successfully. Logan Mailloux's looking pretty good so far with his development curve. Luke Evangelista, we had the highest ranked and have been successful there so far. I know he's off to a bit of a slow start this season, but I'm sure he can turn that around. Nashville in general has been off to a very slow start. So yeah, that was McMichael to a T. Is there were certain elements that we love in a player, and we did not weight his attributes correctly, and that was the end result.
I mean, he was on. That's another lesson learned that we've learned is to not doubt London Knights player.
Yeah, they're good.
They have the best development program in the CHL. They have like the best coach. Every year, like we're gonna see a player from London, and I'm like, he's all right. And then 3 months later, you're like, yeah, he's more than all right. Sometimes they do start their young players very slowly in the lineup. They don't give them like, first line player, blah blah. They have to earn everything they get, and often they don't even play them at 16. A lot of time they're 16 years old season. They don't even play unless you're Sam Dickinson or Mitch Marner, Easton Cowan, a guy that we might talk at some point in this podcast in the coming weeks or months. There was a guy who didn't play at 16, and Evangelista didn't play a lot also at 16. Logan Mailloux was not played like 4 or 5 games at 16, so they're not scared of sending those kids to play junior B or junior A, and a lot of time they'll just put them on the lineup at 17 and just, let them develop, let them get better, let them earn the ice time, the power play ice time. We saw with Oliver Bonk. Oliver Bonk also didn't play at 16 in the OHL, and he became a first-round pick in the NHL. That's a good example of a guy that I remember I saw early on. I was like, I don't know, I don't know if I see what I know Mark was really high on Oliver Bonk, and at first I didn't really see it. And the more you watch, and the more season progress, you're like, yeah, this guy is gonna end up being a really good prospect. So that's the London way. They just get better and better and better as the year progressed. And McMichael was that too. He had some flaw in his draft year, but maybe, as you said, Brad, we put too much stock on the compete level for him in his draft year, and then he figured, and as a pro, I think he has figured that out. Another fail by us. Judging with all the bad picks that we see in this draft, like McMichael in the redraft, if he keeps playing like he's playing this year, like he looks like a legit top 15 pick, I would say. Because I'm looking at the list or ranking here from 2019. There's a lot of players in the top 32 that are not doing too well. McMichael was ranked 32nd by us. He's definitely moving up at least 15-20 spot, I think, in a redraft. The last player, Brad, you want to mention, and it's not someone that I'm sure a lot of people know who that is. His name is Layton Ahac. He was the 86th overall pick by the Vegas Golden Knights. We had him ranked 36, which is somewhat of a second round value. And you were really high on him, and definitely things did not work out for us and for you on that one. Tell our listener and viewers about Layton Ahac.
So, byproduct of Prince George in the BCHL, and excellent frame, and he had a second half surge that then translated through the playoffs, and that's where I made the fatal error. So I thought that his peak performances throughout the playoffs were just the starting point to what this player could develop into. It's like, we got ChatGPT now, AI is exploding, everybody wants a piece, everybody's invested in it. You're not getting a RoboCop in 1 week, okay? We're not getting RoboCop in 1 week of AI development. So that's what I thought with Ahac. I thought we were getting RoboCop. I thought he was just going to explode in college, become this 200-foot monster defenseman. I thought Vegas had one of the best picks of the draft. And, it's safe to say that I don't think that's going to amount to much now. So, it happens. But I wanted to bring it up for a reason. I didn't have to throw myself under the bus, but I will for a reason. It's a teaching lesson. Just because a player has peak performances throughout the playoffs, and just because they have a second half surge, doesn't mean that you should, as a scout, run with it and then think, okay, if he's this now, just imagine the next level. Maybe that's the best level he's got. Maybe you got to calm down, simmer down a little bit. Jerome, you know me, I'm a passionate scout. Sometimes I can freak out about a player and be like, this is the beginning. But it was not. It was the end. And sometimes it is the end, and that's the lesson. Be very careful how you determine a playoff run or a second half surge. Tristan Robbins had a second half surge. That cost us too. Second half. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it works out. Seth Jarvis had a second half surge. We absolutely thought that was the real version. It was. So sometimes it goes both ways, but it's very, very important to distinctly evaluate which way it's going to go here. That's one of the keys to scouting. And so Ahac's a beautiful example where I absolutely bombed out on a prospect because I way vastly overrated his second half surge and his playoff performances.
Yeah. Even if you look at his stats here, pretty similar production from his -1 draft year and his draft year. So that maybe looking back, that should have been maybe somewhat of a sign that, as you said, you thought he was improving in the second half, but maybe it was just, if you look at the production wise, it's very similar. So, but then he had a good playoff with 17 points in 17 games. So sometimes we get overly excited with a surge come playoff time. So as we said, the name of the podcast should be "Scouting is Hard" because it is really hard, and sometimes you have major miss like this that you might have nightmares about, but that's part of the gig, I guess. We like to have our own opinion. We don't like copy and paste or the list we see. Like, it's really our opinion. In that case, I don't know if anybody had this guy rank as high as we did. I'm guessing no initial team had him as high as we did because he went a good at least 50 spot right after where we ranked him. So it happens pretty much every year. We don't want to talk too much about it, but sometimes it's good for it's a good learning lesson, I think, Brad, for to do those type of episode like we did 2018 a few weeks ago. So this week we do 2019. We're gonna do 220, 221, 222. One of the most important things about scouting is like learning, why we miss, and learn from it. So, Brad, maybe next week you and I, we're gonna do the reverse of this. We're gonna look at the guys we got right. It's gonna take a week for us to find who we got right because there's not that many. I'm looking at the list here. There's definitely one that will for sure be mentioned, and his name is Moritz Seider. But the rest, let's take a full week here to find those 5-6 players we want to talk about. Yeah, Brad, any last words before we end this episode?
Well, for next week, I mean, some of the ones we got right, it wasn't that they hit, it's that we knew that they were bad and that they were drafted too high because that was how bad the draft was. So that we could probably talk about them too. Let's incorporate both. We'll see where we get.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining us. As I said, we'll be back next week talking about who we got right from the 2019 NHL Draft. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have any question, comment, don't be shy. Leave a comment on YouTube. It might lead to some episode idea that we can do. If you have any question, maybe if we have enough question at some point, maybe we can do like somewhat of a mailbag episode where we answer questions. So don't be shy, and also don't be shy. Subscribe to our channel, like our video, share our videos, help us grow the channel. Brad and I really enjoy doing this podcast. We have been talking about doing this for many years, so finally we're doing it this year. So we're pretty happy so far with the result of it, and we'll continue, and we'll see you guys next week. And by the way, just before I let you go, our new NHL draft rankings will be up the last week of November. So check hockeyprospect.com. So the week of the CHL and TDP prospect games, the new ranking will come out probably the Monday of that week, because I believe the games are on Tuesday and Wednesday. So should be by Monday, should have our first ranking of the year. We are working hard at it, and we're going to do a few show about that ranking once the ranking is out. So stay tuned for that, and we'll talk to you guys next week.